This is AM Agenda Live from Brisbane this morning. Thanks for your company, and joining me from Melbourne, Liberal MP Kelly O'Dwyer, and in Adelaide, Labor MP Nick Champion. Nick Champion, first to you on the forum last night. It was a much more robust encounter. Tony Abbott at one point saying, "Does this man ever shut up?" What'd you make of that? Is that fair enough in the heat of the battle?
Well, I guess it's a glimpse of the real Tony Abbott slipping out of the straitjacket. It's a bit like a moment in The Shining when Jack Nicholson's sitting there in front of the typewriter. I think we got to see, the real Tony Abbott. He doesn't like scrutiny, particularly of his paid paternity leave plan, and that's because it doesn't stand up to scrutiny.
Kelly O'Dwyer, your thoughts on that and Nick's assessment?
Well, I respectfully disagree with Nick on that. I think what we saw last night with the behaviour of Kevin Rudd is an insight into why a third of his cabinet decided to resign, couldn't serve with him. He's very interested in asking his own questions and answering them, wasn't terribly interested in hearing from the audience and the concerns of Australian people. We saw vintage Kevin last night, and I think that's why so many Australians were so frustrated with the waffle that we heard from him and his relentless negativity on Tony Abbott.
Kevin Rudd spoke to the party faithful again this morning at the Geelong Trades Hall. Let's have a listen.
A half-time hooter sounded last night. We're in the second half, or in this part of the world, we're in the third quarter. Rugby league fans, that's... Anyway, I'll explain that later on. We're in the second half, we're in the third quarter. This is a hard election. I'm not going to stand here in front of you and say it's not tough, it is. But I'll tell you what, you've got someone as a Prime Minister of this country who's a fighter. I am a real fighter.
Now, there was a sense that the performance last night, Nick, I think certainly he was a much better performance last night. He looks a bit buoyed by it. Then that lacklustre effort in Canberra in the first debate, which was pretty average. Do you think that this might give him a bit of confidence and some confidence that he might be able to get a bit of momentum in this campaign now?
Well, look, I think the more scrutiny that is applied to the Liberal Party, to Tony Abbott and to their policies, the better. And what we found with just in the last couple of days with their paid parental leave plan is that it's either substantially undercosted or that they're going to put levies on companies and levies on franking credits. They're going to make self-funded retirees, often who have raised their own children without too much help from the government, now pay for a very, very expensive and generous paid parental leave plan. This plan that Tony Abbott wants to put in is now a bit like a sort of intergenerational regressive taxation. It seeks to make self-funded retirees through franking credits pay for a very generous scheme for today's families, and I don't think
I'll go to
fair.
Kelly on that in a moment,
I don't
Nick.
think it actually stands up to scrutiny.
I'll go to Kelly O'Dwyer on that in a moment, but first of all, just on that issue that I asked you about, the Rudd mood, he seemed very flat the last few days. Last night, a better performance. Will that give him a bit of confidence that he needs? He's been described as a confidence player.
Well, look, I can only go on what I've seen in Adelaide. He came to Adelaide last Saturday and gave a fighting speech to car workers, pledging to help them and their industry survive and prosper in Australia. And it's a pretty clear, it was a pretty clear fighting speech from the Prime Minister on that day, one that made me proud, one that made the workers proud. So, from what I've seen of him, he's fighting, putting up a good fight in this election.
Kelly O'Dwyer, on the issue of the paid parental leave scheme, I know that the opposition leader last night said it's been fully costed by the Parliamentary Budget Office, but isn't there still that vulnerability because all of that detail has not been made public?
Not at all, but first let me just respond to what I heard just now. I mean, things are pretty grim when Kevin Rudd has to go down to Corio, go down to Trades Hall, go down to a seat that's held by more than 10% by the local Labor member in order to stage manage another event. If he's not out there prepared to stand on his record as Prime Minister and talk to ordinary voting Australians, you know things are pretty grim. In terms of our paid parental leave scheme, we've been very upfront about it. It's fully costed. The Parliamentary Budget Office has gone through it with a fine-tooth comb. We're going to release all of our costings, as we have said from day one, before the election. We said it would be before the election date, after the PFO had been released. That's what we said we'd do. That's what we will do.
But don't you think the weak point for Tony Abbott last night, and what overall was a strong performance, I thought he was calm and relaxed as he has been throughout this campaign, but the one weak point was when he was unable to provide all the detail. It took the forum last night to actually get the information out from him that the levy on the big businesses would only fund half the paid parental leave policy.
Well, no, Kieran, I'd respectfully disagree with you on that. We've said all along that the company levy was going to be a substantial component on paying for our PPL scheme, as well as rolling in the government's existing PPL scheme. I mean, there's nothing new in any of that, and Tony Abbott made that clear last night. I make it clear again today. It will be made clear every time anybody asks this question about PPL. But let's also be clear on this other point, and that is that every woman will be better off, whether she's on minimum wage or on a higher wage, on the average wage or even a higher wage, will be better off under our paid parental leave scheme.
Nick Champion, just finally to you and those comments made by the Prime Minister this morning. He was so critical and has been critical of three-word slogans. He's got his own slogans now, and it's a lot simpler than 3 words. It's just the word cut. He keeps saying it, and isn't he hypocritical after saying he's going to be a positive campaigner and it's all negative?
Well, we know from what was revealed last night that the Liberal Party's policies are either going to be funded by cuts or by tax rises, and you saw that with the paid parental leave. We've seen that, you know, in the assault on self-funded retirees, franking credits, their dividends, and every woman won't be better off, because if you're a retired woman who's already had her children and already paid her way, and you're relied on dividend streams, well, you're going to be paying again, and this time for younger women. And I don't think
but you've hit their
that's
superannuation to the tune
fair.
of $8 billion. I mean, that's really rich.
Fair.
You've increased their cost of living, reduced the private health insurance rebate, $8 billion hit to superannuation. I mean, come on.
Well, Kelly, we're used to your negativity. We're used to your negativity. You've got to answer questions about your own policy now.
We've got to go. Nick Champion, Kelly O'Dwyer, thanks. We'll chat to you in a couple of weeks, which will be just 48 hours from when the polls open. Look forward to chatting to you. Then a quick break, and we'll be right back on AM Agenda live from Brisbane.